stuff, but for a fairly cheap amount of money, you can get yourself up and going, and that's the best way to practice. Because hearing yourself is cruel. Who here likes the sound of their own voice? Yeah, look at that guy! Confidence, yet he's sitting in the back row. No, I don't know. Do you like the sound of your voice? Really?
No, I can't stand it. I got the most everyday voice on the planet. Like, I'm just like, yeah, here I am. There's nothing exciting about me. A big part of voice acting is not necessarily, do you have one of those beautiful, rich voices that everybody knows, oh, you should be on the radio. And it's not necessarily, oh, like, you do all these crazy voices or anything like that. It's acting. You have to know how to act, and that is the number one thing about voice acting. And it's not easy. It is not an easy thing because it's all in your head. You're standing in a studio with nothing else there except for a microphone and your own brain telling you, you're an idiot, what are you doing? Why did you just say those words? And yet you're still saying the words. So you have to really, you do know how to act and speak. And you have to be able to make like an imaginary world in your head, because usually when you're in a room doing this, you're all by yourself. You don't have somebody else reading the other lines with you at all. So maybe you're having a conversation with someone and you're saying, hey Darian, how are you today? And he says, I'm fine, meatball head. And you say, what? What do you mean, what? Did you just call me a meatball head? So all I'm saying is, hey Darian, how are you? What? Did you just call me a meatball head? And so I don't know whether it's like, am I saying it because I can't hear you? What? Did you just call me a meatball head? I can't hear you, like that kind of thing? Or is it, what? Did you just call me a meatball head?
Yeah, I did. Instead of meatballs.
Which is another thing that we should get to, is that I was actually at a convention one time, me being the slower kid on the block. This girl came over and she looked fantastic. She was all dressed up as Sailor Moon. She had fantastic hair. Your hair, everything looks so perfect. She goes, I know, it took me a while to get the meatballs just right. And I went, oh, that's what I call meatballs. And so I then turned to Katie Griffin, who was Sailor Mars, and I go, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. I just realized the meatball, the things on her head, that's why they call her meatball head. She goes, oh. And then she turns to Toby and says the same thing, and Toby goes, ooh, there it is.
I actually had the same thing with my character. After a while, I was like, he's wearing a tuxedo and a mask. What? It's a summary of what I'm wearing. Pretty cool.
We're just going to keep going off on different tangents here. Okay, does anybody have another question here? Yes?
What different warm-ups do you do before you go in the studio? Like, say you're driving down Toronto, what warm-ups would you do to prepare your voice for?
Well, we do enough that we put us in psychiatric ward. You do have to warm up, for sure. I mean, and anything you're going to do, even just humming in the shower, having some warm water near you, and, all those kind of arpeggio things. Singing lessons are the best thing to take, at least one, just to know what it's, just to take something, just so you can hear yourself with a professional who can tell you kind of where you're sitting at, what range you are, if you're a soprano, a tenor, whatever it is, just so that you know where you're starting, your medium value, and then you can kind of go from there, because what you want to know is where you're starting from, so that when you start doing voices, you're not putting yourself in harm's way by doing a voice that's probably going to hurt your voice, because you're going to be recording for 3 hours. And if you're like, oh, way up here, somebody's going to punch you in the gut, and oh, good, yeah. And if it's not placed in the right place, it's gonna kill you. And hour two, they're like, you don't sound the same. So.
Especially a lot of men actors will, get a villain that's talking like this, and they're talking like that, and they literally are. And they cannot sustain that. It is so difficult to do. And by the end of it, their vocal cords are bleeding. Like they're walking out and going, I can't talk for like 2 minutes. It's like, well, you idiot. What were you thinking about? Stop doing those kind of voices. Having said that, I've done that myself. Anything for a job. But when I was doing Sailor Moon, one of the warm-ups that I always did was, just if I could do that, then I knew that I could somehow get to that vocal range. You sort of have to find it. If you were going into a booth and haven't ever said the words out loud, get out of the booth and go say the words out loud. Don't go in there having it done it in your head and reading over the script one. Okay, I think I'm ready. Always, always, the first time you hear those words should not be in that booth. It should be before. You should have heard it and you should know what you're doing. Totally, totally. That's a number one. Lindsay. Another one. I saw somebody else up here too. I want to get people that we haven't asked yet. Yeah.
Any funny stories between you two when you guys were doing voiceover together?
Well, we did it singularly. When we did Sailor Moon, we were never in the booth together. All the cast, generally, there is maybe a few times when they get together for fight scenes and stuff like that, but Tuxedo Mask lived alone.
I get to go in with Rainy every now and then. That was always funny. Little Stephanie Beers, who's about this tall in real life. Maybe a bit taller than that, but not in my books. And she'd come in every day, she'd always call me Mom, because I was her mom in the show, right? So she'd go, "Hi, Mom." And I go, "Really? Really? You wake up with that voice every day?" She goes, "I can't help it, that's just my voice." I'm just like, "Oh, God." I don't smoke, but I'd be like... But she was very funny, especially the one where Sailor Moon and Minnie Moon switched bodies. And when she does, "Whoa, get a load of these!" We were absolutely hysterical watching her. So funny. And now I'm just going to say, too, whatever you do, don't ever let the first time you hear the words be when you hold the booth. Except, of course, if you're doing Sailor Moon, because we never got the scripts ahead of time, ever. Zero scripts. None. Yeah, terrifying. And Toby and I both have this terrifying fear of reading out loud. They say you become what you most fear, and that's exactly what happened with me. I was that kid in class who hated reading out loud. I could read, I was fine at reading, but I could not read out loud. So when the teacher would say, "Okay, we're going to be doing reading out loud," I would be putting my book up in front of me. And I have a complete panic attack. I'd just be sitting there shaking, going, then eventually she'd say, "Okay, Linda," and I'd be like, and I'd be doing one word at a time, and usually that word wasn't even the right word. I'm picking words out of everywhere. Probably a bit of dyslexia, never diagnosed. Back in those days, they were like, "No, you're just a bad reader." And I would come home bawling my eyes out. I hate reading out loud. It was awful, and it wasn't until I was at theater school, when I was like in my 20s. I was, I think, about 27, and we had, one of our teachers said, "Okay, tomorrow we're going to be doing cold reads, reading out loud." And I went over to him after class and I said, "No, I can't do cold reads." And he went, "Well, if you want to be an actor, you're going to have to." And I went, "No." I said, I don't know what to do. I cannot read out loud. This is awful." And he said, "You have to read every day out loud. You have to teach yourself how to read out loud. It is something that is not necessarily natural. You have to teach yourself." So I went home and I was like, and I started reading out loud, just to myself. And I would make myself angry, because I couldn't even do it when I was by myself. I was like, I can't even read. I'm so bad at this. But I slowly chipped my way through, and I would slowly go, "Okay, slow down," because I talk so quickly. And finally I got to a place where I was like, "Okay, I think I have enough confidence in myself. I think I can do this. I don't know." And then along comes Sailor Moon, and they're like, "Okay, go, you're reading. Go. That's you. Go. And act at the same time, will you?" And by the way, that voice is crazy. Go ahead. And I remember just being freaked out the first day I went in there, going, "We don't get to see this ahead of, like, are you just going to play it for me first so I can see it?" And they're like, "No, we don't really have time, like, just go." So it was a bit of a learning curve. It was scary, it was terrifying and frightening, and that rhythm band that we used was the most, it was an animal.
Do you guys actually know how we voiced Sailor Moon? The show of hands, do you know roughly how we did it?
Because it's not like today. Today it's like just like karaoke.
Yeah, basically karaoke. But what they did is, imagine, remember slide film, like clear film, like 35mm film? What the producers did is they hand wrote the dialogue on that film. And the first line, because she's the lead, was the first Sailor Moon. And then the second line would be the other characters. And basically they would handwrite this stuff on this film. They project it on, actually, it'd be about the size of that blackboard, right? And they project those words like a giant sentence